they start? I'm just gonna grab some water.
I go.
Good.
All right, there we are. And now we're going to go away.
That's us.
All right, I think we are at 7 o'clock. So I'd like to call this town board workshop meeting to order. Should we start with the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Oh, that's old. Yeah. We have a big agenda for tonight, and we are welcoming BFJ Planning, Frank Fish and Taylor Young to the table, who are going to talk about the ZRC, but we're going to begin with just a few comments from Mike Stabile, who is the chairperson of the planning board, but also on the ZRC. And then I'm going to turn it over to Frank and Taylor.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to pop in and express just what a great experience the ZRC has been. I think the members would agree that a lot of people had a lot of hard work and insightful things to say and brought a lot of great perspectives to it. But I wanted to, we did a lot of work on it. There's a lot of issues, and there's some big issues outstanding that I'm sure Frank and Taylor are going to go into. And I also wanted to say that as we're becoming busier in the town, and as the planning board has become busier, I'm talking like zoning enforcement wise and planning board, etc. We're hitting upon some more areas that are, illuminating things that need to be addressed, or at least thought about or discussed, and other issues that even through this process, this somewhat lengthy process we've gone through with all these meetings we've had, there's still some things outstanding that need further debate or consideration. And again, I don't know where any money would come from, etc. But I would envision that this process, we're going to go through with whatever changes that have been agreed upon or brought to the town board, and then you guys act upon it. You make your decisions. But I envision that there's definitely going to be things left out there that further study or consideration is going to be needed, and that the process would have to be lengthened or left open somewhat. I don't know. I'd leave that up to Warren or how we do this as a second round next year or whatever. And of course, I have no idea where the money would come from for that. But that's basically what I wanted to say. Just that a lot of great stuff, a lot of great work has been done, but there's still more to be done, in my opinion. So I don't know how the other members feel, but this is as we come up with these applications that are coming up, we're like, oh, look at that, that we didn't realize that was in the code, or oh, look at that, we need to clarify that. So that's it.
Right. Any specifics worth sharing now with the board while they're here? Or it's too soon?
Off the top of my head, I don't have. I mean, you saw where we hopefully again there's some of those bigger pieces which they're probably going to discuss tonight that that are going to hit on seeker declarations, etc. That's obviously something that's going to have to be dealt with. But we're dealing with this restaurant application where we find out that any already existing building / use that pre-existed zoning is all of a sudden is a non-conforming use, or in most cases, or however, the language actually states. I'm not doing it justice right now, but, and, that's a conversation I think we have to think about. Is that really, do we want businesses or buildings that, don't conform to lots in the center of town, to be, have to go through like a, planning board and or zoning board of appeals process, just to keep doing uses that are currently approved for those areas, if they have a site plan requirement, etc. There's some language out there that has a distinction that we were able to pull up from, I think Steve Patterson pulled it up from Lula, where they talked about non-complying structures or businesses versus non-conforming. I don't know. It's a conversation. That's one off the top of my head. I don't know why it's on the top of my head.
Because that represents a very specific and narrow zone in town, might we be able to just have a slightly different way of approaching the Main Street or the Center Hamlet District?
Again, it's a conversation. Warren might want to, have a conversation with Warren about that, like why it's there to begin with. I wasn't here when the zoning was put in. I'm always reticent to say you jettison something before you understand why it's there, and what would the counterfactual be like without that? What does it look like versus what it is now? And I kind of bristle at having, these long processes, these lengthy, if we don't have extra mini meetings, etc., you can ostensibly be 4 months minimum to get something done if you want to open a business, just to get the regulatory approval. I don't know. Is that what we want? I mean, that's up to you guys, town board. We just interpret and go by the zoning that you guys pass. So, but that's something I would question in my mind. But
I think it makes planning board's job easier to continue working on this as a living document for the next few years to get it to where, you guys have everything answered for you for your ease. I think it's worth the town spending the money for it.
Maybe I can get a grant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
for next year.
and I'm gonna try to keep a running list as things come up. So.
I think it might be useful to reconvene the committee each year and have an ability to address what's on the table, as opposed to keeping it going now. We could do it. There's a number of ways we could look at it. It certainly has been a valuable process. I think we have actually accomplished a great deal, and there are these outstanding issues. So
I'm not on that committee, but it just seems to me that it's worth finish,
it's-
even a
yes,
year, we
yes.
already
and not
started
let
it.
it go for 5 years.
Yes, like I
right?
think that,
Um,
I think quite, like, we should plan to get that for next year.
I
so
love
they
the
can
idea of a
continue.
living document. I mean, that
Going on.
sounds
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting. Thank you, Michael, very much.
What are the qualities that make that property non-conforming, Michael?
What's just the fact that it was there before zoning, according to the zoning code. But I mean, what would make it like not be able to be built today?
It had never been through site review. It had
That's
it
why.
had not had a site review. I think that's
Correct.
basically,
That's correct. Yeah.
So, but there are, if it was a new building that was being built now, obviously it couldn't be like 2 feet or whatever it is from the lot line. But it's there. I mean, they can't tear it down. So, these are issues that exist in that area because all this stuff was built, 100 years ago or whatever, more,
and obviously the town wants businesses to continue in those locations.
So-
That's certainly in the interest of the town.
It begs the question again that we talked about on the committee and we decided against it, but having a slightly different code for the business district there as it relates to setbacks in all the properties in the business district are non-conforming. Should use change, should anything happen, it's not just that they were not gone through site plan review prior to the acceptance of zoning, but in fact, their physical nature, the way they occupy the lots will always make them non-conforming.
And we did loosen up made a recommendation to loosen up the setbacks in the business district, right? We did.
In all districts, yeah.
Yeah.
There's not much more room there, but you know, it's more that blanket, whatever you want to call it, that blanket code there about non-conforming structures and uses existing prior to zoning. Anyway, I've blathered on enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks
for indulging me. Yes, thank you for indulging me. Good luck with the rest.
Thank you, Michael.
I'll watch it on YouTube.
Okay. Yeah,
All right, Taylor and Frank.
yeah. Well, maybe I'll introduce this and then Taylor will be able to go through each section, but actually Mike gave a good introduction in a certain way. I think the committee accomplished a lot of things. You'll see we've got both text changes and map changes tonight to go through with you that the committee worked on. And so there's about 10 different, significant proposals from the committee. But then on our agenda tonight, under next steps, we sent 3 things that we felt were not 100% to Warren for his advice, and they're listed in the agenda we sent you, and we'll bring that and go up and go over those sort of at the end. But I think the committee, as Mike said, got through most of what they wanted, but there were a couple of things that we sent to Warren, and maybe a few others that Mike has in mind or other committee members have in mind that didn't quite get finished. So the idea of having another maybe review by the committee next year is probably a good one. But at any rate, what we started, and Taylor, you may want to bring up the agenda, and then.
I need to be added as a host, I think.
All right.
Okay.
You should be on now.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Great, terrific. Well, the first thing there we wanted to talk about just a little bit, just to show you the timeline again that we've been working on. And Taylor, I think that's just the next slide. And we met when we had the 3 meetings called for with the committee. And you see the dates there with the blue dots. So we've reached the point now where the committee has sent, what they've resolved, what they've agreed on to you, the town board. And then we have 2 town board meetings scheduled here. And the first one tonight, and then we don't have a second one scheduled. That would be up to you, because the second one is also seen as what you decide to do. If you do decide to move forward on some of these tonight, or the package of these, we would need to do an environmental assessment form for these, which is one reason we've done proposed text changes and proposed map changes, because the map changes sometimes can raise more more environmental issues. But we were hoping that you could get to a public hearing on the things that you, the town board, are comfortable with, and then other items which may need more review or revisions, we could provide revisions and then do a second public hearing perhaps. But the agenda is sort of that, that we're working toward is shown here, and trying to get this work done in a sort of 6-month process. So that's where it is. And then we realize that after any hearing, there may be a need for another meeting with you. That's purple hexagon there at the end, whether it's with the town board or the supervisor, however, whatever's easier for you.
and then we'd be in a position to adopt some of these amendments. So that's the overall timeline. So maybe if we go back then to tonight's agenda, Taylor, just for a minute. Yeah, if we could go over the proposed text changes with you first. Keep in mind as we go through each of these that we need to start thinking about, and I'm also happy that Warren's on, we need to start thinking about a little bit the compliance with the State Environmental Quality Review Act, so that we'll mention as we go through each of these where we think, we think they're either modest changes or changes without significant adverse impacts. They may have beneficial impacts. I think this is why the committee was doing these changes. So we'll try to comment on those as we go through. So let's, well, Taylor, why don't you go through these? Why don't we start with A?
Yes, all right. Thank you, Frank. I think you and Mike set everything up perfectly, and so we will get started. The first one, and I'm just going to this is the same document that we sent earlier in the day. So the first one is just remove the NND district from the zoning code. The NND district, each of these items that you've seen have a kind of an issue. This is the reason why we think the zoning, or the ZRC thought zoning needed to be changed, and then the proposal, what is the change? For what we understood from the ZRC and the supervisor is that the NND district isn't really needed. That it was, the town had applications before, it was complicated, it was, the authority was split, and now we have a big application coming in that's just using a typical, conservation subdivision. And so maybe the typical conservation subdivision works better than the NND, and getting rid of it does not preclude a developer or someone else in the future of proposing their own zoning for some large developments. All it would do is just remove, what may have been, or what a zoning district or zoning overlay that we think is no longer needed.
So that one is, but I think that one's simple in terms of seeker. If the town board agrees, I don't think removal of the NND from the code doesn't have any significant adverse impacts I know of. The only one it could have had would be on Durst if they were still pursuing it, but they're not. They withdrew their NND application, so you're now pursuing your cluster, your conservation application. So I think that one is ready to go in terms of seeker. Well, okay. I don't know if there's any discussion on that, or I know that the zoning, the ZRC was pretty much in consensus on this.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Taylor, you might go to item B here.
All right. Item B, this is a small text change for accessory dwelling units. Our understanding was that there was confusion in the existing code about whether the landowner needed to live in the principal dwelling or in the accessory dwelling. So we just, you can see the red text here is the proposed additions, a strike through is a deletion. So all we're saying, or all we would be saying, is that either the principal dwelling or the accessory dwelling shall be owner occupied for the duration of the special use permit. Just kind of clarifying that, if a person owns a larger house and they don't want it anymore, or don't want that much space, they can move into the smaller dwelling unit and then rent out the larger house.
So it's a small change, but an important one, the committee thought, and the change is highlighted there in red.
I think it's really important for us in the potential for building more rental space. Rental housing is pretty much at a premium here. And also, if seniors would like to take care of less of a house and rent out the big house, they would be able to do that.
We're okay with people renting out, if they needed to rent out the house either way, yeah. Okay, either way.
Yeah, I would just pipe in on this. The actually, on an application before the planning board, the Capuano planning board application, planning board has already issued a waiver to the property applicant to allow either the accessory or the principal dwelling to be owner occupied, in part based upon the knowledge that the zoning review committee had made this recommendation. So just want you to be aware of that.
Real time.
Right.
If you're okay on that one, we can go to, C is a little bit more, Taylor's gonna have to bring up the schedule to go over this.
Yes, this one, kind of speaks to what Rory was talking about earlier. There was just some concerns that, Pine Plains has some lot sizes or lot dimensions are unique, some are small, it's a historic community, and historically, buildings were maybe built differently. So these are the changes here, but I agree with what Frank says. The best thing is just to go straight to the schedule. You can see the bulk of the setback changes. So that's, again, what here in red are what we are proposing to be changed. I think a big one is this rear yard, minimum rear yard. So in the Hamlet Business, Main Street, Center Residential, and residential, we're shortening, making it the required rear yard smaller, from 40 feet, which is pretty large, to 20 feet, something more manageable. And this would help, if someone wanted to have an accessory dwelling unit, it would give them more space to put it in their backyard.
And then I think, Taylor, the other one is that side yard.
Yes, and that's the other big change, is going from a minimum of 15 feet to a minimum of 8 feet, and then having both side yards must be 20 feet combined. So one side yard can be 8 feet, but then the other side yard would have to be 12 feet. And that is in the Main Street and then Center Residential. And then in the Hamlet Residential, because that one is the most, has the largest minimum lot size. We didn't go all the way to 20 feet in the rear yard. We went from 40 feet to 25 feet. So they're relatively small tweaks, and just changing the numbers, but we're hoping it will help people not be, non-conforming, existing buildings to be non-conforming, and give them flexibility to expand or build an ADU.
Yeah, I think that was, Mike brought that up a little earlier, the ability of a person to come before the planning board, maybe without going to the ZBA, that this was aimed, as we understood the committee, to try to make life for existing residents and owners in the Hamlet Center a little bit easier, so that these requirements, a lot of homes are found non-conforming, a lot of businesses. This would help them, a lot more of them, to be conforming. And if they wanted to add on, they would only be before the board or the building department, rather than the ZBA. So that was the aim here.
And I think it's covered in this item. I may be incorrect, but you see this footnote 6. We added footnote 6 to the Hamlet Main Street and Hamlet Center Residential. And that's a new footnote that we added. This was a question that some folks brought up, which is that the existing setback, this is a required front yard maximum. So the house can only be a maximum of 25 feet from the front lot line. But if a home's neighbors were 50 feet back, then it would look out of sorts, and maybe there was privacy issues, So what we did is just added that this can be modified by the building department if an examination of surrounding properties indicates that there is already an established front yard setback that is different from this maximum. This kind of gets to something that we heard a lot from the ZRC, which is to give flexibility to the building department and the planning board, not overprescribe things, but to say, let the planning board or the building department look and see what the nearby homes are, and let them make a decision to relax the front yard maximum in those two zoning districts.
So that would be a question about that. That would be a decision that the zoning enforcement officer or the building inspector could make without having to go to the board?
Yes.
Not going to
Yes.
the ZBA?
Yes.
Right. In other words, Warren, if there were, yes, our understanding now is that there's not, on this one, that the committee gave us an example where, say 10 houses are in the neighborhood around an applicant are now set back, say 20 feet. And the requirement here is 25, that the building inspector on, on evidence, on proof that the others were 20 feet, could approve a 20-foot maximum rather than 25. We have seen this in other communities where either the building department or the planning board can approve what we call the build-to line. It's a setback, but if all the other houses are set back a certain distance and the requirement would require something that's out of sort of out of sync with that setback, then the building department could allow something that allows the applicant to conform to the other setbacks around them.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so that's footnote 6.
Right.
And that's it on this one on building setbacks, I think, Taylor.
I believe it is.
Yep.
Right, let's see. Yep, so then we'll go to, yep. Oh, and there's an accompanying, text change in accessory uses, changing that all accessory uses must be within 10 feet of a property line to 8 feet, just to make it conform with the change of 8 feet side yard minimum
Side
yards
yard.
that we've made in the table.
Yeah.
Right. So this one is another one, another text change aimed at helping, existing businesses or homeowners, making it easier for them to expand a pre-existing non-conforming use. It's, again, relatively small or relatively simple changes where it said A and B. One is about expanding the use within an existing structure, and then B is about expanding an existing building or structure that houses the non-conforming use. And we've made the same change in both paragraphs. But reading it through, what we're doing is saying that any proposed extension that singly or cumulatively exceeds 25% of the gross floor area of the structure, but less than 35%, may be allowed upon site plan approval of the planning board. So this change here, this deletion of application to and approval by the zoning board of appeals, now the building owner or business owner does not have to go to the ZBA. They can go through site plan approval of the planning board. So we're cutting half of the requirement there. Now, if it's more than 25% of the building or 25% of the use is expanding, they still need a separate approval, but instead of requiring a use variance from the ZBA, we're proposing to require an area variance, which is an easier variance to get.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
So, the person will still need to get approvals, but we're just making it a little bit easier.
Well, also a use variance is virtually impossible to obtain. So,
Yes, very much.
so
And usually it's a successful business that wants to expand.
Right.
So it's right.
Absolutely.
Dave, can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry, I'm just catching up on my notes on here, but if we go back to the accessory uses and structures, you chose 150 square feet. And I just didn't think that was consistent with the building code as far as, with our building code, at least as far as what size square footage.
Now, anything I should say here that anything in black is in the code now.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, the only change we made here is just because we, in the schedule that, a schedule of setbacks that Taylor showed you earlier, we had changed the side yard to 8 feet.
Mhm.
And then realized, the committee pointed out, I think the building department pointed out that, on an accessory structure, it's 10 feet. So if we're going to change the side yard to 8 feet, let's make the accessory structure 8 feet from any property line. So that was their suggestion. But that's the only change here. The,
Okay, well, I had one that was 140, it was a 12 by 12 structure when you start getting into actually the definition of a structure. So it was either 140 or 144 square feet was when you actually were required to have a building permit. So I wasn't sure if that's just a very minor point.
yeah, I'd have to defer there a little bit.
Well, it's just a comment that I had noted.
Right,
I think you're correct. That came up in our discussion that if you're, you a small woodshed or something, you don't have, you're building it, you do not have to get exactly underneath 150 square feet, I believe. It could be 144. You do not have to get a building permit for that. This
Correct.
is, if you're building a single bay garage or something that's larger, you can now have it within 8 feet of the property line instead of within 10 feet of the property line. Just going with our schedule change.
So is what you're saying, Taylor, that line item A there, should it read, the structure shall have a gross floor area of 150 square feet or more?
no, we're not, no, actually, Drew was, your existing code said that in black. Everything in black here is existing. But Drew said he was happy with the 150 square feet. So I think this reads okay. The only change we're making, what would explain this a little bit more, Taylor? If you can go to the schedule again, the area, schedule, everyone sees it. You'll see here on the, there we go, on the side yard, we changed it from 15 feet to 8 feet, or the committee did. And that when we made that change, Drew pointed out, he said, well, wait a minute though, if there's an accessory structure like a garage, that has to be 10 feet. So everyone realized, or we realized anyway, well, if we're now changing the side yard here in these zones to 8 feet, we should change the accessory structure setback from 10 feet to 8 feet, so it's consistent. That was the only thought there, to make it consistent.
Rory, I think I see what you're saying though, right? So this reads, accessory structures, no accessory structure shall be permitted within a required side yard except a shed or other accessory, structure used for storage and other passive use may be located within the required. So this is, I see, this is that. And this was, Frank is right. We're saying the same thing. This is for your woodshed. Your woodshed must be 150 square feet or less, and it can only be 12 feet tall. But this section would be more restrictive than our proposed change. So your woodshed, which is 150 square feet or less, can be now within 8 feet of the property line and not 10 feet. So I misspoke earlier when I was saying that this section was talking about the garage. This section is talking about smaller accessory structures.
Yeah, the key here is that which we did not change, Drew was happy with the 150 square feet. So our understanding from Drew was if the structure is under 150 square feet, then you have an accessory structure in this code, and that then wanted to make an accessory structure only 8 feet rather than 10 feet from a property line. That's the only change we're making in this, or the committee was making in this section. Now, sorry, go ahead.
Should the committee have suggested to add the language that says a permit is not required if it meets A, B, and C? Does it say that there?
My guess, Rory, and I would need to double check, is that is in a separate section. I just put this like a small, where this little thing is. I think that is stated somewhere else.
Okay. Sorry, Frank.
Go ahead. No, that's fine. So that was the only other change here on the building setbacks. This change for an accessory structure from 10 feet to 8 feet.
And the permitting, there are permitting requirements for woodsheds and those types of accessory structures in the Uniform Building Code also, which apply to town of Pine Plains.
Right.
that's where I was coming from.
Yeah,
And it really, the setback issue was, it used to be under a certain size, it's just be the setback over that size, it had to have a building permit. That was the difference, rather than just dealing with setback.
Okay.
And the number was different than the 150, so that's why I was wondering if that was, just like a typo or an inconsistency that we were going on.
Are we governed by both those codes as well as the same building?
Well, my understanding that if from your code, correct me, Warren, if this isn't the case, it's just from your building inspector, that if you are over 150 feet, then this section is not applying. It's really saying that an accessory structure is under 150 feet. So if you have something that's, let's say, a large garage, then that garage has to meet the regular setbacks. Say it's a 250 square foot garage. It does have to meet the setbacks that are set out in the area and bulk standards for each of the zones.
that's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, that's correct. So this one, a smaller woodshed can be within 8 feet of the rear property line, but a single bay garage cannot be within 8 feet of the rear property line.
Correct.
That's the difference.
Okay, should we add that to the bulk? Is that in the bulk layout?
It's not, because the bulk only is for, I think, larger accessory structures that need a full building permit, is my understanding.
Yeah.
The bulk table is for all uses, both primary and accessory, but I think it's for ones that need, full permitting.
Yeah. So if you're a structure that's over 150 square feet, you have to meet these standards here that we're looking at, all the yard standards. So the committee wasn't proposing to change any of those. What they were saying is it was just almost an afterthought. And I think Drew said this. He said, "Oh, wait a minute though. If it's an accessory use, i.e. a use under 150 square feet, that use currently has to set back 10 feet. And we're making the side yard here, the minimum side yard, you can see that change from 15 to 8. So he said, why don't we make it 8 feet for an accessory structure instead of 10? It's an accessory structure being less than 150 square feet. That's the only change being that they suggested here.
What if we added to part B, the structure shall be located at least 8 feet from any property line, including the rear yard or something, but only because I'm still confused. I guess I get it, I understand it now, but I've been confused by this slight change throughout the process a little bit. I'm wondering if other laymen, when glancing at that, won't understand the minor distinctions there, that the extra permissiveness we're allowing. Let's hope it's clear.
Rory, could you say again, just so I understand a little bit better?
So I guess as I've looked at this, and I know it's obvious to you and Taylor, Frank, but I look at it as sort of an outsider who's not as familiar with this language a little bit, but that it's not immediately clear to me, I don't know about the other board members, that 8 feet to the property line is meant to include the rear yard as well as the side yards. Only because we represent the data on the bulk regulations.
Yes. If you see item B here, now I realize that this needs a careful reading, but it says the structure shall be located at least now 8 feet from any property line. So that
Right.
it would apply to the front, side, and rear property line.
I understand that now, and I hope that's clear to a casual reader of it too, is all I guess I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
But I'm sure it is. Does this board feel like it's easy to understand any property line?
So like if it's a corner of your lot, you would go 8 and 8. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's how I was
it's just
reading
me,
it, but-
thanks.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
Listen, it's good to go through all of this because if you go to public hearing on it, be familiar, yeah. Okay, well, Taylor, you want to go to D?
Well, we reviewed D. Were there any
Okay, we did.
questions or
Sorry.
discussion on D? Changing the use variance, area variance, and kind of cutting the zoning board of appeals out of the first part of this, the expansion of 25% and less than 35%.
No, it makes sense to
I
me.
like that.
I like it.
Yes. Big-
Great,
yes.
great, okay. I'm just writing down okay here to this one. And then Taylor, you could go to E.
All right. E. So E, this was Ridgeline protections, and this is the ZRC, kind of we say here, this note. ZRC sees this as phase one of Ridgeline protections. This came up in our discussions that as our meetings went on, we kind of got a clearer view of what exactly the ZRC saw was the problem and how we think the best way to go about it is. So this is phase one. It's a good step, but it may not be as tight or as prescriptive as the ZRC or the town may want to go in the future. So what we did is added slight text changes in Appendix A, which is the design standards for anything requiring site plan approval, and then in Appendix B, which are the conservation subdivision design guidelines. So again, this is it's pretty small, and I think what I'll do, if you'd like, I'll just discuss. So all we are doing here is saying that the planning board, in their review of a site plan, can look at or can say buildings shall be situated in a manner that avoids the following. There's some other environmental features, and we've just added ridge lines. So ridge lines may be under significant ecological or ecological habitat or something like that. But what we're doing is just calling it out directly, kind of giving the planning board a little bit more of a force to say, specifically here it is. And same thing, that's the same thing in Appendix B for conservation subdivisions. Here's a list and all the different ways that dwellings need to be sited to avoid, or dwellings need to be on the least fertile agricultural soils. They should be distant from any protected farm, these sorts of things. And so we're adding to minimize impacts to ridgelines and views of ridgelines. So these are relatively small text changes meant to give the planning board a stronger appeal when they're reviewing a site plan for a conservation subdivision, a stronger leg to stand on, as it per se.
I love that.
And so this is, zooming in here, that's phase one. So this is, we think, and the ZRC, if I can speak, said they agreed with this, but saw this as phase one, because what this does not do is cover anything that does not require site plan approval, which, if I'm correct, is a single family home. If I bought 20 acres and I built a single family home, this does not prevent me. These specific changes do not prevent me from putting it right on top. Now, other things may, but this specifically doesn't. So the ZRC recommended a phase two, which would include the ZRC or another body identifying and mapping ridgelines. Other towns, they have circles drawn around the ridgeline. I'm making up a number, 200 feet or something like that from the ridgeline in either direction, and saying, oh, if you're building a home here, it does require site plan approval, whereas previously it wasn't. So that's kind of a carrot and a stick to not put your home on top of the ridgeline. But I think those would need to be identified and mapped as to which ridgelines are the most important. And as we say, the ZRC said, this would be good for not just ridgelines, but also other scenic areas that could be drawn, on a map and say, it's not saying that you can't put your home within however many feet of the ridgeline, but it's going to require an extra level of review. But right now, you wouldn't necessarily have to.
Kelly, your microphone might be being struck by your shirt there.
My shirt? Okay, is this better? Sorry. What you're saying, I should have worn a t-shirt. I understand. Next meeting.
So much better. So much better. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'll
That's
start
much
again
better.
from the beginning. No. So, and I thought the two-phase approach was smart. I think that is something that needs a little bit of work, but I really like where the phase 2 is going.
You also have the complexity there where we have a lot of land in conservancy already.
Mhm.
And we don't really need to put that in if it's already conserved from having a house
Yes,
built.
that's right.
It's kind of complicated because I know near where I live, there's a lot of conservation and that has protected quite a lot of areas. Whatever, it's
Do
complicated.
you
Very
think
good
there'll be
point.
less incentive to put land into the
No,
DLC?
no.
Oh.
I think that, I mean, there still is land being put into
Yeah.
conservation, yeah. But the ones that already exist don't need to be identified as a ridgeline
They're
property for
protected
this.
already.
I see.
There's already
Right.
protection here. I mean, maybe you want to, but it's redundant
Yeah,
Yeah. So
or
it's-
somewhat possibly redundant.
yeah, and that's a good point because if you get to a phase 2 here, whoever does that, they would want to be aware of that point. In other words, if there's land in a conservancy, you don't have to be worried about mapping that ridge line that's in the conserved area. Because nothing,
Unless that conservation easement has not put in that particular restriction on that particular ridge line. It's complicated.
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Complicated piece. Phase 2 is kind of a complicated piece.
yes,
You can-
which is
It
why,
would require some fairly extensive resources.
yeah,
to-
yes, and that's why they decided to make it phase 2. Yeah. Okay. But phase 1 is okay then, so
Yes,
Yeah.
that's great.
with where we put it, right? Citing standards. So
Okay.
citing standards, as you can see there, we added ridge lines. And I think the same in, right, site design criteria.
Okay, on to F. Here is another relatively small change, but giving latitude to the planning board. And so the best thing to do is just to show the portion of the code where this is. So this is in conservation subdivision design guidelines, or not guidelines, applying where you apply conservation subdivision. How many lots do you need? That sort of thing. So that is, I'm zooming here. So this is in the standards and procedures. Here's this table in the zoning code tells you what type of subdivision you are allowed or you are permitted to design and build. There's a small change, but the ZRC wanted the planning board to have the ability to require a conservation subdivision design, which gives another a layer of review to say avoid this prime agricultural soil, avoid existing forest line, other agricultural features on minor subdivisions, so 2 to 4 lots. They already have that ability for major subdivisions. But all we did was, we did a small text change to this footnote 1 that says the planning board may require a minor subdivision to be designed as a conservation subdivision where it finds that a conventional subdivision would have an impact on the preservation of agricultural resources. Then we are proposing to add, or the ZRC is proposing to add, open space or the preservation of natural resources. And so ZRC, the planning board would be able, do not have to, and the applicant, could come with a design that would not require them to do this, but they are able to require that a minor subdivision goes through the conservation subdivision process.
And we thought this was a nice addition, giving the planning board some flexibility on these minor subdivisions. Was this this one can at first glance not be clear. So is this one clear what they're trying to do, or? It really is changing that, putting footnote 1 in that one one area there for the rural districts to cover minor subdivisions and make sure that the planning board has, has the ability now in a conservation subdivision to preserve things, not only just for agricultural resources, but also for open space and the preservation of natural resources.
I like that.
Yeah. So that is F.
Okay.
And
On to G. Okay, so this one is a series of 3 text changes. We put them in the same in subheading G because they're in the same, relatively the same portion of the zoning code. So the issue is that the zoning code limits many principal buildings to 12,000 square feet of gross floor area. It's been good for protecting or supporting small businesses, but there are maybe some larger buildings that the town or the ZRC felt the town would want to permit and or attract. So this table, we're not proposing any changes to this table here, which is section 275-17, but it just shows where the maximum building size is 12,000 square feet for non-residential mixed-use buildings. And so what we are proposing to do is in the individual standards for specific uses, which there's many of these uses in the code, we are proposing to make text changes to expressly permit larger buildings with certain conditions. So I'll start with this one. The first is a senior citizen building. This is in the section B. It uses multifamily dwellings and senior citizen dwellings. We are not proposing to change anything for multifamily dwellings, only for senior citizen buildings or dwellings. And so here we're adding in item 14, it's split between 2 pages. I apologize. There we go. But we're saying that it's, first item, the maximum size of the principal senior citizen dwelling building is 12,000 square feet, which is consistent with this section of the zoning code that requires most building to be 12,000 square feet or less. So then subsection A, or section A, will be the planning board may issue a special permit for a larger building if the following conditions are satisfied. So the applicant must submit a full environmental assessment form consistent with SEQR, the State Environmental Quality Review Act. And the planning board may require that the full environmental assessment form has appendices detailing impacts with natural resources, transportation and parking, visual resources, or other impact areas that the planning board deems necessary. The total senior citizen dwelling parcel must be 5 acres or more. And then the maximum permitted height for the senior citizen dwelling building is 3 stories or 40 feet, whichever is taller was our thought. And we've checked that the fire department can service buildings that are that tall, but the reasoning was that maybe they need space for an elevator they're going to need a 3-story building, and having enough space for elevator bays is how we got to 40 feet.
And I should give you some background on this. The committee had raised to us that they'd like to actually encourage, assisted care facilities, senior housing in the town. And that, we said it's hard to put a maximum square footage on them because it depends on who comes in. I mean, the normal size we've been running into recently, if it's just one, senior facility like independent living, or if it's assisted care, it's just one type. They're usually aiming for efficiency's sake to have around plus or minus. I mean, it could be 90 units, it could be 110, but it's somewhere in the vicinity of 100 units. And so that's getting to be, a larger building. It could be, 80,000 square feet, for instance. And the reason for the 3 stories is we found in your educational facility, which Taylor will get to, is you're already allowed a school to be 3 stories and 45 feet. We find 40 feet is usually good. It's all you need for a senior citizen facility. But what we tried to do here is not we had this discussion with the committee, and we said, I said to them, look, we could put a maximum size on here, but if we do, you're outlawing, or you're not outlawing, I'm sorry, you're making it difficult for someone to come in who wants to do a continuing care facility. They want to start with, sort of senior housing and go from there to assisted care, and then from there to a nursing, more of a nursing facility. So that the concept is you could move, and I know this sounds a little bit, it doesn't sound, it sounds like you're moving toward, later stages of life, which you are, but it would require, usually you see 3 different types of buildings on the same facility. So we said, rather than put a maximum size here, the planning board would be able to control it through the environmental assessment form, through the minimum acreage, and then just through the existing code, because you have controls over in your code now over the total lot coverage, and they're pretty good. We find them to be pretty good controls. So we thought that this was sufficient. Because the committee's original question to us is, can you just put a square footage number as a cap? And we thought that's hard to do depending on, the size of the parcel they have. One of the best I know of, it's a continuing care facility. It's not that large, but it's about 20 acres. And, but it has, has a couple 100,000 square feet. And when you think of that at first glance, you think, oh, that's too big for Pine Plains. But the committee did say that they didn't want to preclude that. They said they wanted to have the option to look at it, that the planning board could look at it. So that's where this has come from here. And Taylor, you may want to show the educational facility.
Yes, so we'll go down. So educational facilities, this actually is an interesting change. So we're saying that there's 2 or 3 changes here. So the first change is a similar principal building size. And this came from the ZRC just saying, maybe we want to encourage some sort of higher education, but it could also be, a retreat center, kind of, yoga, something like that. Maybe we want to encourage some sort of educational facility to locate here. So very similar, that the principal building is 12,000 square feet. But if the applicant submits a full EAF, then that can be relaxed. However, there's less changes here because, as Frank was getting to, that there are already existing regulations that deal with the building size. So that here it's already existing. They allow, or the code allows 45 feet for 3 stories, provided that the minimum setback, or property line setback, is 3 times the building height of the tallest building. So if you build a 45 foot tall building, you've got almost 150 feet setbacks. So
we presume this was written this way because possibly, and I don't know this, your high school or some other school may reach 45 feet in height. Somebody must have measured it. But we just left that as it is. We did, though, delete, Taylor, you might want to cover this deletion.
Yes.
6.
So in our discussion of this, someone in the ZRC said, wait a minute, and this is existing text, that nursery schools, trade schools, health institutions are not permitted. They're banned in the code. And they said, well, maybe we want a trade school or a nursery school. And so we're gonna just remove this, which does not permit the uses as a educational use. And you'll notice one of the items is a correctional institution. So there was some questions about, well, by removing this text, are we now permitting correctional institutions? But no, based on our reading, correctional institutions are not defined currently in the zoning code. And because they're not defined, they are not permitted.
Do you guys think the board should address the issue of the 135-foot setback at all now before moving on, or does it not really matter?
You know, for this item 7, Rory,
Yeah, and that,
the ZRC didn't bring this up as an issue that needed to be changed. You know, and I'd ask, you know, so I would take that first, that they did not, they saw this and we discussed it, and I didn't see that this needed to be changed. You know, I understand, but I think, and also maybe what Frank is saying, that this in item 3 here, it's the school sites must have a minimum of 5 acres plus 2 acres for each 100 pupils, but actually it's a minimum of 10 acres. So the minimum lot size is 10 acres for these uses. So if it's not, if it's not a big issue, it's saying these are going to be large lots. They'll have the space, is my understanding of this. But you know, I think it's a question.
On the next part of this, if you scroll down a little bit too, Taylor, I was unsure if we have a textual change, but we identify principal educational facility building size. If you move down to part 10, but then you identify it as principal senior citizen dwelling building. Is that how that's supposed to read?
Oh, then this is a typo.
Okay, thank you.
good
That will be
catch.
changed. Sorry about that.
Very good catch.
Good
Thank
catch.
you. We should say they're educational building, yeah.
It's only for, it's age restricted educational buildings is what we were thinking. Very specific building type. I will change that. Thank you.
Yeah. By the way, Taylor, there is one other thing I should point out, just an English language sort of zoning text change. It's minor. If you go back to the senior citizen one on the height, I think it should read 30, I'm sorry, it should read, it's back on the senior citizen one under height. So there, I think that probably should read item 3 there. Yeah. The maximum building height for senior citizen dwelling units is 3 stories or 40 feet, period.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what the distinction Frank is making is that 40 feet is the maximum.
Yes.
You can't have a 30-foot first story and then build
Right.
2 more stories on top of that.
Right.
And have a 50-story building, right? So it's 3 stories or 40 feet, period. Yeah. Yeah.
Got it. All right. Keep on.
The third one is that resort.
Yes. The resort, there's a few more changes, but you know, the meat and the heart is the same. The maximum building size is 12,000 square feet. The planning board may issue a special permit for a larger principal resort building if the following conditions are satisfied. 1, the total resort property must be 100 acres or more. And 2, and this is different, an environmental impact study consistent with the State Environmental Quality Review Act. And then we said the planning board may allow a larger size based on the results and analysis contained in the EIS. So the EIS is much more detailed, much longer process, much more costly. And the planning board says, we say contingent based on the results and the analysis in the EIS. So directly linked to what the environmental impacts are, the planning board may permit a larger building size.
And I think everyone knows here that this one might affect the Durst, current Durst application in that this does give the planning board the ability to entertain a larger principal resort building, but they have to have 100 acres devoted to the resort, and then they have to do a full environmental impact statement. We don't know from them what kind of acreage they're looking at or what kind of building size they're looking at, but we do know they're committed to the EIS, and we're in the process now with the planning board where the planning board will require the EIS.
So
Go ahead, Taylor.
moving to building height, it's the same language, and maybe we want to change it as well. Frank, is that
Yeah, just put
maximum
a
permitted building height is 3 stories or 40 feet,
period. Yeah.
period. So we will
Yeah.
change that to not say whichever is greater.
Yeah, quite frankly, I was a little bit worried here because we had a discussion of with Durst, and he showed some examples of different resorts. One of them was the Sagamore, which is fine. That's a 3-story building from having been in it. But the other one was Mohawk Mountain House, which is, a little bit higher and larger. So we thought keeping the same 3-story 40-foot standard that you have for senior housing would be fine for the resort, and that way you would not be getting something of unknown height.
And then this is a small, but we think really important change to parking. So for resorts, this section 7 here just says how many parking spaces there must be for each part of the resort. But we want to put in, or the ZRC wanted to put in, that the planning board may reduce the cumulative parking requirements provided the applicant can show that there will be shared parking, because I don't think anybody wants, they pay paradise for a parking lot. If we don't need everything and we can be proven that we don't need it, let's have more natural area or whatever else.
And I think that completes this one.
I believe so.
Okay.
Okay.
So that one, let's see where we have we've now covered, I think, all the text, these are text changes. So we've covered all of those. And I think that on all of these, we haven't been through it yet on an EAF, but we have to do for you, the board, if you move forward on these, an environmental assessment form. I think we can reasonably say on all of these changes that they're beneficial for the community. I don't see a significant adverse impact of doing these. So you would be able on these proposed text changes, I think, to make a negative declaration under seeker, and that is rely on the EAF we do for you and not have to do a full, EIS. So that was why we divided these into the text changes and then the map changes. So next we might want to go to these map changes.
Yes. So yeah, if that works for everyone, we can move on to the remapping of existing districts. So we're just two map changes you can see, H and I. One's remapping existing and then one's proposing. This is just existing districts that we're going over right now. So there's two issues. One is the ZRC wants to expand the H business district along Route 199/Church Street to promote mixed-use residential and commercial buildings at a higher density than are currently permitted. With the H business district, permits living above the store, as it were. You can have a 3-story building with 2 apartments above and resident or retail or commercial on the ground floor. And then there's also expansions of switching the Hamlet residential district to the Hamlet Center residential district, which the uses are all the same. It's just a smaller minimum lot size. And the thought there generally is to allow or to have more lots be conforming with the zoning code. And then there's a few other, this we mentioned here with Leah's Mountain View Restaurant and Burlinghoff Electric parcels. The ZRC wanted to rezone those, just as changing the zoning district to reflect their current uses. Just kind of a cleanup item. And they're not, you'll see on the map, which is I think what we should do to really explain it.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
So this is existing and then proposed, and then we can go, I don't know what's easiest. Maybe we'll go, this is both side by side.
Yeah, side by side here is the left-hand side is your existing, is that right, Taylor?
That's correct. Left-hand side is existing and right-hand side is proposed. And then this, on the proposed, it's this thick black line here. This shows you what's been changed. All the parcels within this thick black line have been changed. So I'll zoom back out. I think
So-
maybe starting with the smaller ones, just to sake of easy. This is Leah's restaurant. Here it's just rezoning the portion of where the restaurant is from Hamlet Residential to Hamlet Main Street to support the existing restaurant use. And then this is the Berlinhof Electric parcel. This is the thick black line here is the proposed rezoning. This is not the parcel boundary. The parcel goes here. If this makes sense to everyone, it's a little tough to see, but this is the parcel. It's a rectangle. However, this light blue is wellhead protection district, which we know was designed for the wellhead for sensitive environmental features. We are not proposing to change that at all. It's just changing what was previously Hamlet Center Residential to Hamlet Main Street.
This recognizes its use.
Yeah. Just recognizes use, and then some small, these are expansions of the Hamlet business. It's just on the south side, expanding, we have 5 parcels here on the south side of the street. So this goes all the way up to what, colloquially I think is the Catholic Church lots. That's these 2 lots here. No proposed zoning change under this for these lots at all. The larger zoning change is on these, I'll zoom back out, is these lots here. These residential areas are being proposed to be changed from Hamlet Residential, which is this kind of brighter yellow, to this orange, which is Hamlet Center Residential. And the difference, again, is that the uses are all the same. It just, the minimum lot size goes from 30,000 square feet to 20,000 square feet.
So it's easier for a lot of those houses you see up there, yeah, right in there, to all conform. Taylor, I think the other one then is the HR has been reduced a little bit, right?
Oh, you're right.
Yep, the yellow. Yeah.
Up here. Well, so this was a difference, and I think, Frank, if I'm understanding you correctly, we had at one point discussed why not make this area also Hamlet Center Residential, but in second review we said, this is kind of a better transition area, because this light yellow is a rural district. So north of Ryan Road, we're proposing no change.
Right.
We're proposing to keep this as Hamlet Residential. So it does require a little bit larger lot sizes, but we think of that as a good transition area, maybe between the more residential Hamlet Center Residential to the rural areas.
And the
Same
other
thing.
one, Taylor, yeah, go ahead.
Around the
Right here. Yeah.
the lakes, we're not proposing any changes here. So because it's next to sensitive environmental features, the ZRC wanted to keep the minimum lot size a little bit larger than the smaller ones.
But where we are
HCR.
proposing a change, so everyone knows, is you can see there is a little bit of a change just to the east of, I cannot read that road, the name of the road. Lake Shore.
Lake Shore here?
The east side of Lake Shore Drive would no longer be the HR, but it would now be the HCR.
Right.
If
This,
you-
this parcel was brought up to us with the ZRC as an important parcel. And this is, I believe, an open field right now.
Yeah.
So this was an important parcel for the town. And so if this were to be developed as housing, it could be developed with more units under the HCR than it could under the HR, because the minimum lot sizes are smaller. Of course, provided everything meets the Dutchess County Health Department's septic. That's really the limiting, but it's a limiting factor. But it's our understanding from the ZRC, the Pine Plant is excellent soil, excellent perk, and so 20,000 square feet per lot is a reasonable generalization that I think the a developer or someone who did a subdivision here could reasonably expect 20,000 square feet.
And then the final one, Taylor, you might want to cover the purple industrial zone.
Yes, and so this one it's creating a new district. So this is the only new district that's being proposed, and it's just to kind of reinforce or reinforce the uses that already exist here in this little industrial cluster. You know, this is, I believe, these lots here are the auto repair and fabrication shop. There is the butcher shop over here, I believe, on this lot. This is the agricultural equipment sales. Here, there is a multifamily, or not multifamily, sorry, a mixed use residential and commercial building, I believe, on this lot. And the best thing to discuss what is permitted and not permitted is to go to the table of uses. So what we tried to do here, as you can see, we've termed it the ZRC has termed it the LI, the light industrial. The only residential that is permitted is mixed use dwellings. So, you know, living above the store is permitted here. Mixed use residential and commercial. But no single family homes, no other type of residential uses would be permitted. And then what we did is kind of went through and said things that we thought would be useful or would be typically allowed in an industrial district. We recommend allowing it as it is allowed in other districts. So if it's site plan approval or special permit and site plan approval, we've kind of tried to carry it across. If that makes sense. So you know, these are all similar agricultural operations. The big one, so automotive repair is permitted, where it's currently not permitted, you know, in the Hamlet business districts. Let's see.
I think the main thing we've allowed is light industry.
Correct. The big one is manufacturing, which
Right.
is on the next page. It's manufacturing. It's previously only permitted in the rural district, and we are permitting it in the light industrial district.
And that's a good one, Taylor, that you've highlighted, that you notice manufacturing is allowed it's allowed in the rural district. So it's kind of interesting for us. We are allowing it then in the light industrial district where it would normally go. And so we feel in the light industrial district that I'm always worried sometimes for seeker where we're creating a new district, but we've kept the uses. We've kept to the uses allowed in your current code in the light industrial district. And then also we're really just recognizing everything that is in the light industrial district now as a use. And then Taylor, you might cover the area in bulk, which is similar to what exists.
Right. Let's go to area in bulk. Oh, here's another one. A vet hospital. This may be a good spot for a vet hospital, which is not currently permitted in the Main Street district. All right, let's go to the bulk table. So we're saying a minimum lot size, because this district is right beside the Hamlet Main Street, Hamlet Center Residential. So we wanted to match that minimum lot size here. With no central sewer is 20,000 square feet. Same, matching the minimum lot width all the way across, the lot depth all the way across, front yard maximum all the way across. The only real difference is we're proposing to keep the rear yard at 40 feet instead of 20 feet because we're thinking these do, you know, back up to residential areas. So maybe having a larger setback would be a better buffer. And then the maximum lot coverage is at 50%, which is similar to, or it's the same as Hamlet Main Street.
Right.
Can we go back to the map, please?
Yes.
We've got a couple other areas right now where you basically do have light industry. And I was just looking at those, and one of them is the Mitchell property. down on the corner of Route 83, where we have our barrel factory. And the other one is the Liberta property. I know you discussed that. That's at the corner of Lake Road and 199. But in that area, where you are right now, which you were centered on at 83.
Back here?
Yeah. I really was excited about seeing the light industry. And, but I'm looking at it, is it possible that we could do something? Well, you have, no, that's the wellhead. Do something with like an overlay in which there are some existing light industry places or places where a light industry would be appropriate. This place, right, where we talk about the Filch property or the Mitchell property, or now where the barrel factory is. Also the Gardner property out on 199, which is basically just 199, what is it, Mountain Road, what is it, Skippy Mountain Road.
Yeah.
And also the Liberta property, which basically has, you know, a long-standing existing multi-use building there with not much else available that you could do with it. That's at the right up there where, what is it,
Lakeside Lane.
Lakeside Lane.
This is
Yeah.
Roberta, right? This one.
That's-
Right, the parcel, right there. I know there was some discussion, I was just curious about that, because it does not really lend itself to anything except what's being used for now.
So the discussion where we did discuss a Liberta property and especially with should there be a proposed rezoning, in my understanding or our understanding is that maybe it's manufacturing or whatever businesses that are going on there are currently they are more, I'm trying to think of the word, they are not they may have a larger impact. They're let's say it's, you know, a big manufacturing company, so they can keep doing that use. Now they cannot expand, you know, beyond what the zoning changes we've made, that non-conforming use. But in the zoning code, let's say you wanted to go, and I'm not sure what is going on here, but let's say you're going from a cement factory or something, and you wanted to go to a less intensive use that is still non-conforming. You can do that in the zoning, under the zoning code, as long as it is a less intensive. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on at the Liberta property right now, but the property owner or business owner can change their uses in the future, provided it is maybe even the same intensity, but definitely less intensive.
And what dictates intensity? In other words,
The planning board.
okay.
By the way, the committee we had quite a discussion on this property. That's where this property instilled the change under the proposed check changes that we talked about, where we were giving the planning board the ability, not the ZBA, but the planning board, to go from 25% to 35% expansion of those uses. And the people on the zoning committee, I think, and I'd stand corrected on this one there, but felt that was sufficient for what he needed. I mean, we do not know, we haven't talked to Mr. Liberti directly, but we would be giving him that extra 10% expansion under that text change that we talked about, where we were giving the planning board the ability for pre-existing non-conforming uses, which his are. They've existed when the zoning code was adopted here. He already had his operations in place. So we're giving him that extra area in bulk with you, going from 25% to 35%. And then, as Taylor just mentioned, as long as he changes the pre-existing use to one that is not more intensive, he would be okay. By the way, I'm not saying you shouldn't consider this. I'm just saying that the committee did really zero in on this, on the Liberta piece quite a bit. And they So that's one, but I wanted to ask you on the other two, though, that certainly the barrel factory or the Pilch Drive area, if that makes sense for, for an industrial designation, the committee had not raised it, so we didn't really look at it that way. But is the barrel factory now, how did it got approval, obviously, right?
Mhm. Yes, it did.
And so if it did in the HMS, is it now it's an allowed use there, or?
But I'm going to switch to a different map that may be a little bit easier for us to see.
Basically, it was an existing building at the time. It was a hardwood warehousing sale, retail sales, wholesale sales.
So it was a change of use probably, and they probably used that same text, that it was a less intensive or not more intensive use, I guess.
And so which parcel is it in this area?
Right at the very bottom, the large building.
There.
There you go.
The large factory looking building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
this one here. Got it.
Okay, the building next to it is the county highway garage. The one
Oh, yeah.
right-
Yeah.
That's this group down here.
Yeah.
That's right. Yep. You see the pull off. I'm looking just to get the address. Write it down. Yeah.
By the way, now that I see this, where we also like to avoid, this concept of spot zoning. However, this wouldn't necessarily be, I mean, if you did this as an industrial, I'm just thinking aloud, did this as an industrial zone, I'd include that county garage. Now you've got two different parcels. It's all on a significant roadway. That's a possibility, but the other question would be, is it something that he would want, in that he's got approval now? And if we got, in other words, let me raise it another way. Once we get the industrial zone in place, if you're comfortable with it, and he wants to expand into something else later, he can always apply for that. In other words, he got approval. He's an approved use here, right?
Yes, he is.
So I would almost go with what you might want to talk to him. Normally on these, by the way, I should raise this too. I don't know if from our own committee, before you would want to go even to the industrial zone as the committee's proposed it, you would want to, someone should, I think, talk to the property owners in that area. I presume that they would want the industrial zone, but there's questions I wanted to raise about these map changes. Actually, maybe I should raise them now because we've covered them all. And I don't mean to avoid that question because you may want to consider expanding them to Route 83 to the barrel factory.
Frank, one of my considerations is, if we're looking for an area to expand into,
Right.
I didn't want to restrict that area too much. We have had people looking, let's just put it that way, at things that were more of a light manufacturing nature than they were of a residential nature,
Right.
or shop kind of thing. And getting back to both there and the Liberta property, the biggest question that these homeowners or property owners are having is the marketability of their properties. As taking the Liberta property as an example, if it's zoned as a residential area and it's obviously not, and really doesn't have much of a residential capacity to it at all. It's just that's the question that they keep posing to me, is how does this affect the marketability of what they have?
Right.
And if it were to close, due to the nature of the ownership right now for any short period of time, and they were to lose their approvals, you know, they're really concerned about that.
Right, right, okay.
And that's his biggest concern, is really the marketability of the property. If someone could look at it and it's zoned more residential than for the existing use.
And there is an adjacent property that we neglected to talk about in the ZRC across the street from there, which Don calls the Gardner Trucking outfit. But right there, Taylor.
Yes, yes.
Which is a space that we won't have residences on, but I imagine it is the Hamlet Main Street district, so you can do other stuff there, but that lot does fall pretty far back and is a real commercial industrial space.
Right.
Headed west there too. What is that? I see the trees on it now. Is there nothing there?
Well, that's where you end up. If you headed west, you come to Paraco.
Yeah.
That's Paraco right there?
That's Adams right there. Where the trailer.
Yeah, this is one little structure, it looks like here.
Where the trailer is down there, and the property line right here, and then you go into the Paraco gas facility.
Oh, yes, there's Paraco.
So that is
There's
a cluster of,
Yeah.
of those uses there.
So a cluster of uses, right? Well, that's a possibility. When we first looked at, Taylor, could you go to the zoning map here? Can you change? it?
Yes, the existing and proposed.
Existing would be
Oh.
fine,
Sorry, I'll go back.
or proposed, whatever. Just so we,
This is the existing zoning here for these parcels we're just talking about.
so they are HMS.
Yes, which is generally a general business district. However, this one, I believe is a gas facility, is Hamlet residential.
Right. Okay. Well, a couple options. I mean, one, right now, both Liberty's front of his parcel and then these two other parcels you mentioned, not the gas facility, but are in HMS, which we think allow most of what they are doing, what they want to do. On the other hand, I see what you're all saying, that these HMS zones for Liberty and across the street could be a industrial zone.
Right, because if in the future someone, let's say Liberta, lost their certificate of occupancy or their permit, you know, they couldn't go back to, you know, an intensive use.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah, and I don't see residential going in there at all.
But there were those in the community that wanted that to happen.
So that is, and Rory's correct, there were concerns about.
I know the property, a lot of that Liberta property goes steep up the hill, and it's mostly.
That was that was a committee concern.
Yeah,
We not go deep into Liberta because it had these environmental features in it.
Yep.
And Taylor,
Development anyway, right?
yeah, it's straight up. the whole-
yes,
Right.
except that if you lost the non-conforming use of the main
I get it. Yeah.
flat area that he kind of carved out of the hillside, I think.
That was carved out.
You're taking away, and it lapses, then you have a problem with the use of that land and the value of that piece of property, where it's been for a long time, it's been a very commercial use.
yes, yeah.
I
So
wouldn't,
there's- Okay,
I don't think it's problematic to use that. some kind of zone.
To the industrial, or extend
Yeah.
the Hamlet Main Street into the entire property.
Well, no, just give it a light industrial, which is what it is.
You should talk to Shot probably, Don, and see what his thoughts are. Communicate, but
Across the street, right?
certainly across the street makes
Mhm.
as much or more sense.
Mhm, mhm.
yes, yeah. And
Well, that-
Taylor, could you show where our proposed light industrial, the committee's proposed light industrial?
Yes.
So we see that. I'm just trying to get a better feel for.
That's here. It's
Right,
down the street, and we're talking about these parcels here.
yes, right.
Let's see if I can do a markup.
So those, the front of Liberty certainly, and across the street,
But if you take from Lakeside Lane and go northwest, you basically have a residential, Liberta's entryway. You have not an entryway, but where he stores his dumpsters, unfortunately.
Yeah,
And then you got a residential and a gas store or truck repair and an auto body shop that are in those areas right in there.
You know, there's
Right.
these three parcels here that go
Yes.
along.
Yeah.
Right. That one triangular shaped parcel is residential, a former restaurant, but residential now.
Maybe something like
then-
this.
last one right there.
One just east of that is the auto body shop.
I see.
And then the next narrow one, I guess it must be, the next narrow one is the garage.
Right.
You have a house. And then, as I say, the flag of the Liberta's property. Now, the only problem I see with the light industry area is that the single family homes would now become the non-conforming.
No, you can't have a single family in there?
No,
It has to be
not permitted.
Right, right. We didn't allow a single family in a light industrial. The reason, yeah,
So, and looking at that.
Yeah.
But across the road, like you say, if we were to talk about with the trucking business, right there, that, that has been a piece of property that's been looked at by other people looking to come into town because it's obviously, it
Yeah.
already has a large commercial building on it and a large open area.
right.
It felt well, and it also was vacant, and it would be an expansion area. Just some thoughts, and as I say, I'm just reporting what people have mentioned to me.
Yeah. And you had mentioned, can we go, Taylor, let me just ask, that would leave, let's say we did these two areas on both sides of the street, light industrial, it would leave us a little bit of a HMS. Can we bring the light industrial further to the, yeah, you can read my mind,
So
further to the, I'm sorry, further to the west on the north side of Route 199? What's there?
That's that large wet area,
Oh, okay.
ah,
All right. We don't want to do that.
maybe.
like a big
Major wetland.
Major wetland.
Yeah, yeah, it should, okay.
I'll put this is
Because the zoning law, that was one of the places that was built for commercial expansion, with the idea that it would be very difficult to happen.
Yeah. Okay, so that area should remain the same, should remain as is. The only thing I would do, Taylor, if you might draw a second line, I'm sorry, let's go to the south side, Liberta. I know that the committee thought that the yellow, what's in yellow, should remain yellow because the topography was so steep in the back. They actually didn't think it, well, I don't want to speak for them, but the image I got was they didn't want that to be developed commercially. So in other words, if you drew the line at line is now, or for the HS, which is in red, Taylor, just to, yeah, if you went that way, then
Yeah.
you have light industrial south of 199 and one light industrial north. So we would have little parcels. It would avoid a spot zone.
So it would be this. My only concern with that is where the existing building is. I agree with, I think, Frank, I think you are representing our discussions, 100% correctly. But I wonder if, I think his building is back here.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Yeah, or
Yes.
you could extend the line along Lakeside Lane.
To that corner, to that property, that weird corner there, yeah.
Something like this.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then come down.
That would help him.
That would do it.
That would
Yeah.
be
Something
very,
like that.
The thing is that if you were to go back in there, it has no use
correct.
as except for Forever Wild. Unless somebody wanted to do a quarrying operation, and then that would be. the whole-
Yeah.
Dump grinding operation.
Well, part of it.
The only thing I'm afraid of, I'm just expressing the committee's concern there. Taylor, do you mind going to we have a topo for that, right? The topo
Yes.
is very steep. as you say, a quarry might have worked. But the,
That's what it looks like it might have been at one time.
There's some
Yeah.
excavation going on right now.
Yeah, he was.
There.
yeah,
I don't
it
know
is very,
why.
Stopped today to ask,
Oh, you did, good for you. And the answer was?
nobody there.
I saw you coming.
All the rocks going on.
With this map, we're thinking, here we go. And we could really do something like this, right?
yeah, although Taylor, where you're drawing it, for some reason, what the map I'm looking at, we're off.
That's the wrong place.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Oh no, my artwork is gone. All right, here we go.
no, here it is, yeah. You see those, they're very faded lines, but you can see those
Oh,
topographic
yes.
lines.
Yeah,
Those are fairly steep, fairly steep slopes in there in the back. That's the only thing.
They're
Yeah,
very
if you went down like that, I think it would be better.
All
This
right.
is general. We could either
That works.
try to avoid, following the topo is what I was thinking here. Follow the topo where it curves.
Yes.
But
Yes,
that-
yes, I love
If
it.
you were to take a ride
Yeah.
back,
I
Yeah.
love it.
unaccurate. There's a very large gully that goes up to the back. I don't know how far back it goes, but it,
Yeah,
In the satellite image, you can see, the excavation.
Yeah, let me.
That's a lot better.
So
well,
yeah,
you
I'm
can-
not.
that area in there, right? But I can't see the property line based on that.
So this is previously excavated, but it's. Am I understanding correctly? But it's all rock and steep.
Right, he's used it for equipment storage.
storage, yeah,
Basically, it's a classic old iron.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not steep there, I think Don's saying. The topo map is
That's-
wrong for that small excavated
Yeah, it
area.
does.
Oh, just for that small area.
Right. Okay.
The other thing is to include that area.
Right.
Yeah,
We
Yeah,
could
that's
include the
the-
area.
you might as well include it.
Hey,
Yeah,
now we're talking.
yeah,
Yeah, now it's looking good.
yeah. Okay, now,
Like a-
question, and I guess I might,
Here comes the balkanization of the desert.
okay. Well, we could try this. Let me ask the big question. The reason we divided these maps, the zoning into a text change, A through G on our agenda, I think you could go to public hearing on, and we could have an EAF that really allows you to adopt these changes, because I think you could make a negative declaration. And I think most of the proposed text changes, I don't know this. You would be the best guide of this because you know your own town much better. But my sense is, listening to the committee, that these would be relatively not too controversial, the text changes. In fact, a lot of them might be supported at the hearing. And we could make a neg deck for a negative declaration for compliance with the State Environmental Quality Review Act seeker. So they would, you could go to a public hearing on that. I'm differentiating that from the proposed map changes, H and particularly I. H are the ones we went through with you. I think we can make a reasonable case on the map changes in an EAF, but I talked to Warren about this briefly. These are map changes, so I believe in most communities, I have to ask. One difference between a text change and a map change sometimes is people have to be notified of a map change on their property. And the other thing I would say is that the environmental assessment form on these map changes will be changing some areas. The difference is that the house needs, instead of 30,000 square feet, 20. I feel that has very small impact because much of it is developed now in the hamlet. But there's some growth in, there's some growth possibility there on the new map change. We would just have to quantify it and be able to say that from a traffic point of view or a school children point of view, the impacts are de minimis, they're minor. And I think that would be the outcome. What I'm trying to say, I guess, is that on the map changes, you might want to make sure there might want to be an effort for either one of you or the building, I'm not sure the appropriate person, the building inspector, or the people should know what's coming. In other words, the worst thing in a public hearing is someone gets up and said, no one told me you were rezoning my property. So on the map changes, I think on a map change of the type we're just suggesting now, the people in here, the key people, ought to be contacted to make sure that they're okay on it.
There's-
That's relatively easy, I think.
Well, there's just one that I see is somewhat problematic, and that's the Hollick property.
Mm.
It's on their change.
That's right.
Change
At
it.
the business district.
It makes sense to change it, but that's going to be controversial.
So maybe some things have changed, I don't know, with the diocese going forward, but the ZRC had sort of held back for a little bit in its determination to include that strip of the church lot along Church Street there as part of the business district, but to keep it as Hamlet Main Street. Thinking that that might give more room to chat with the diocese, but if they're not interested in having a conversation with us, we might want to encourage them and lay out a pattern of development for them, which we didn't choose to recommend to this board, but we could take it up again, of including the addition, the extension of the Hamlet Business District further west along Church Street to the edge of the Catholic Church itself.
This is where it's saying it currently stops. Our proposed changes stops right here.
And
we-
by the way, I should,
Yes,
Rory,
that last
Wouldn't be the last one.
Correct, that's correct.
And,
I
and
should-
the other issue
Sorry.
isn't, when we did the Hamlet revitalization with John Clark, that was one of his suggestions, was that downtown sort of run down that way.
Continue that way, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there was thinking that would be a good thing, but then there was some inside baseball thinking happening that maybe, I thought maybe you were privy to some of this, but that maybe
No.
it wouldn't be right to show that, to compel the diocese to react to this change in zoning.
I think I personally have no thought about that.
Taylor, could you bring up the existing zoning for this parcel?
Yes.
Frank could maybe remind us, Frank, do you remember some of the thinking that the committee had about why we
Yes.
made?
Oh, no, I can. Yeah, I just wanted you all to see that the zoning of the front part of the Catholic Church property currently is Hamlet Main Street. So that HMS allows, correct me, Taylor, but that allows commercial. That allows retail and commercial.
Yeah, yeah, okay,
Does.
yeah.
So it does extend. It does extend to the west, that Hamlet Main Street, across the Catholic school, the Catholic Church property right now.
I was bringing this back up because the HMS is a good general business district. The biggest difference is you can have a smaller lot or a more narrow lot. The setbacks are smaller in the business district.
Yeah, so Taylor, if you go back to the map, then we'll see the Catholic Church property. I think, Rory, you were saying you wanted to consider allowing some commercial, but commercial is now allowed on 199.
No, just saying, consider actually putting it into the business district, which is what our long-term plan was.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
I was hoping Frank, you could remind us why we didn't want to do that originally, but you and Scott were saying, oh, that's a good idea. You didn't want to reveal something to the diocese.
Well, the concern that I always have with a rezoning which, is going to increase
Put into the,
property value where the municipality may in fact want to buy it or purchase it at some point, is that rezoning tends to increase the value. And when you want to be.
That's not gonna, because it's my understanding that that piece of property will be very difficult to sell unless we have infrastructure.
Yes.
And so I don't see anyone buying it, in particular us, as a town, without that in place or a possibility.
Well, you could have, they could develop and subdivide and have commercial lots along Church Street before making a
Yes.
determination about what happens with the other 16 acres of their parcel there. But I think if we want to see more business district, slightly narrower lots, just make it slightly easier, here's our chance to continue it down to the church if we wanted. And we'd held off previously in the committee, and Taylor and Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, because of what Frank just suggested. Well, we don't, if we end up buying it, we don't want to make it too expensive, but if that ship has sailed, maybe we should lay out our plan as we want it, which is to have the business district extend to the Catholic Church, I think.
Yeah, and I should point out in our agenda that particularly Scott wanted us to develop some text for the committee. And that text we sent to Warren, and we should probably follow up this meeting and send it. Well, I'd maybe have Warren send it to you, but and under our agenda, Taylor, if you could go to our agenda, I'll just point out to everybody where it is. Under item 4 on our agenda, under next steps, and I know I'm getting ahead, but I want to answer your question, Rory. We sent 3 additional zoning items to Warren for his review. One is the solar law, and we can get to that. Warren's done 3 or 4 of these in Dutchess, so we wanted him to review that. And then we called this the Hamlet Mixed Use Overlay District. And we developed this in response to the committee, and it could apply to the Catholic Church property. But it has in it, and I wanted Warren to see it, things that allow, a significant increase in density, such as 10 units to the acre on this site, provided the site had sewer, because the sewer study, our understanding was looking at the Catholic Church site for the part of the sewer facility, I think 3 to 5 acres, if I'm correct on that.
Right.
So we developed this because the committee asked it to be developed, but I'm concerned with it, of going forward with it without, thorough review by you, the town board, and taking this into consideration of the sewer study. But we did develop this text, and we sent it to Warren because we felt, hey, this is text in response to the committee. In order to, and we could go through this with you, but I think it's worth maybe another meeting. But Warren, if you want, maybe you I wanted it to come so that I wanted to send it to Warren so that it was confidential and privileged. I didn't know that we wanted necessarily to discuss all of this in public to start with, in other words. But we did develop an overlay zone which could apply to the Catholic Church property, provided that that property was used in part for the sewer facility itself. In other words, in order to get the overlay, you had to make either a payment toward the sewer district or donate land, that type of thing. So we looked at this in a special way, if you will, of the Catholic Church property, because I had been, learning from Dara that there had been conversations with the church, that those conversations had not really materialized in any way. So I don't know if you want, you might be getting this to me required a little study and a little thought, and might be something that you want to discuss in a meeting with Warren, perhaps.
Would that overlay, Frank, exclude the area that we now identify as being the Hamlet Main Street District component of the Catholic Church lot?
No, it would include it. Yeah. Yeah, it would.
We wouldn't want to see that. We wouldn't want the street frontage there occupied by townhomes. We'd rather see mixed use commercial development.
Oh, yes. So I would have to get into, I'll tell you what, can I suggest that we, going through this, the simple answer is yes, that the Hamlet Mixed Use Overlay District would allow the uses that are now allowed in the commercial part of the property. So it would allow a mixed use of the Catholic use of the Catholic Church property. It's just that I think that this raises questions of whether we can do this even on an environmental assessment form. This type of density and mixed use, we saw as, waiting for, putting it in text form and waiting for an applicant to come in who would then have to do seeker. I'm sorry to get into this, and so I've resisted getting into this, as you can tell, because I see it as something that needs thought. It needs a real discussion. And I just felt that it should go to Warren. He should review it and advise you a little bit on it. I don't know if I'm being clear on this, but I do think it's perhaps a next step beyond.
Right. I agree with you, Frank, that I think Warren should have a chance to look at it.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
And then talk to us at some point or advise us at some point how we should proceed.
Yeah, yeah. But the other ones that we've just reviewed with you, plus new mapping perhaps for, for the properties that you just discussed, including Liberty. I think those, I'm trying to suggest that you might have two public here, if I could be even clearer on it, almost trying to suggest having two public hearings. One on the zoning text changes A through G, and another one on the map changes. Because I think to go through this with the public all in one night would be too ambitious. I think it might be better to have, it's just a suggestion to you. I think text changes would receive quite a bit of support.
Right.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yep, excellent.
Well, if you're okay, and I mean, we could develop two, well, I defer to Warren a little bit on this. We could develop two separate EAFs, one for the text change and one for the map change, and you could hold two public hearings. I think it's just easier.
That's perfect.
Is that a
Okay.
second issue though, or the classic breaking up one operation into two issues? I've been away from that long enough so that I don't know if it's still an issue.
Yes, we would want to be careful of what's called, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the word myself.
Segmentation.
Segmentation.
Yeah, segmentation. We want to be sure that each EAF references the other. In other words, so that nothing's hidden. It's all considered. I would say that if the text changes came first, those changes have almost, we haven't done the EAF yet, but they have almost no really environmental impacts. They're very, very minor. The things that have the impacts are the map changes. We're going to have to say, here's our best estimate of how many additional houses or square footage could be created as a result of these map changes. I don't think it's very much, because quite frankly, the committee was trying to make life easier for existing owners just to expand their property or not be a non-conforming use. So I think we could do an EAF on them, but I think the EAF ought to be specific to the map changes, and it might be easier to do. And we could say in the EAF, this is done in conjunction with all the text changes, which are, evaluated in a separate EAF. And you could do two, I just think it's probably easier to do and easier to explain to the public.
Makes sense.
Makes
Okay.
sense.
All right, great. Well, what we could do then is, I think what we would have to do, because I think, well, let me ask a question. It seemed to me that you were pretty comfortable with what Taylor just outlined for an additional industrial zone on the Liberty property and property across the street.
Yeah.
So we could include that as a separate, as an additional remapping. It would be an additional light industrial zone. So Taylor would be creating 2 light industrial zones.
Correct.
And this wouldn't preclude where the barrel factory is. This wouldn't preclude him, when he sees this, it wouldn't preclude others from applying for it. So we could do that and get it ready for public hearing. My caveat to that is when you get the EAF and this additional text on the industrial zone, that someone notify. In fact, I think what would be good is before the second public hearing on the map changes, to notify everybody in some way, either through the newspaper, through your website.
Yeah, yeah. What is that? The tall trees case you're referring to? I mean, there's an important decision with regard to notifying property owners of the change in the zoning. I think we probably are going to have to wind up actually sending notices by mail to each of the properties that is subject to the zoning change.
And that's the safest way. Yeah.
The safest way to do it.
I think we're
I'm
gonna do
okay
that.
with that.
Yeah, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
Gotta
Good.
notify.
Well, I think your next meeting then, I'm sorry, the public hearing then, I'd suggest the first one be only on the text changes. And that gives plenty of time to line up the second one where you could notify everybody then of the map changes.
Yeah, I'm okay with that approach as long as when we adopt it as one action, so that we're not, segmentating.
Yes.
Bifurcating the environmental review and then adopt everything at one, in one
fell swoop.
amendment.
Yeah.
That'd be great then. Okay.
And I agree. I think we could do this certainly on the text changes, but I think additionally on the map changes, we can do it through an expanded EAF without having to go to a generic or draft environmental impact statement.
Okay, great.
All right.
Well, then we have a plan.
Wonderful. Thank you.
We did that in Rhinebeck when we changed, it's a much more comprehensive change in our zoning. We did not go to a DEIS.
Yeah. Well, it's a matter for the town board then, or Dara, we would need, I think realistically, we may need 2 or 3 weeks to get that EAF ready. And we would want to get this additional light industrial zone in. So you could do the first, I think we'd be ready for our first public hearing on the text changes, maybe in late July. I don't know how your board, do you do the public hearings as part of your regular meeting?
If necessary.
We often do, yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be that way.
We could do it as our workshop meeting.
Yeah, I think you should do a special meeting or do it at a workshop meeting.
Yeah.
I would say we, and Taylor, I'm just chime in here, that EAF is going to take us 3 weeks, I think.
I think so.
Yeah. So I would say late July, sometime in, or early August, late
Yeah,
July.
We have the scoping meeting on the 31st and the 21st, as I believe.
Yeah, the scoping is on, you are correct, the first Wednesday night. I would avoid those, yeah, I
Yes.
would avoid that.
So
we're gonna
I
have
was,
enough on our plate.
what about the 26th
Of what?
July?
I may be away,
Ah,
depending on.
Wait.
Canadian.
Wait, the 26th of July is
This Tuesday.
that's a Monday night, right?
Yeah,
Your way, you want your board, yeah, you want your board there. Dara, did you say you were away or?
I may be away, but I don't know. But it's okay to go forward without me.
we could
Well,
join you.
We could, what about August 2nd, Monday, August 2nd, just delay a week? Are you back or?
Yeah,
Those are,
I go away those 2 weeks.
those 2
Oh,
weeks.
okay, all right.
Put Zoomer in.
my wife's birthday is in that week, so I want to keep that flexible with the week off. Otherwise, I'm gonna be in for a divorce.
That's
We're supposed
All
to
right,
go.
Warren, all right.
So can we go back to the 26th? Is that?
26, I have a Rhinebeck Town Board meeting, but usually I don't go to those meetings usually. We usually have pre-meetings, attorney-client sessions. But if we did it, say at 7 on the 26th, we could do that.
Okay. And we would need to have your regular notice for a public hearing. Warren, I guess you would do that, or
Yeah, we can, and that would just be for the zoning text changes?
just the zoning text changes, yeah.
And you would have a full EAF done for that? Is that?
Yes, yep.
Yeah, I think that's not going to be a terribly controversial process.
No.
Yeah, yeah, good, okay. And did you say 7 PM on the 26th? Or?
Yeah, that would give me flexibility in case I have to attend the Rhinebeck Town Board meeting.
Okay, good. Okay. All right, and then maybe after that one, we could talk about the mapping.
Yeah, that's going to be more formidable.
That's more formidable, yeah.
Okay.
All right, great, okay.
There's just one thing I want to mention. It looks like we've made some kind of silent agreement that we aren't interested in a light industrial on the parcel by Stewart's. I am not in favor of a light industrial there. I think it's an entrance to the town and we want to keep it as attractive as it is. And there's conservation agricultural land on the other side of the road, and there's Mill Hill, and I'm not really thrilled with the idea of seeing light industrial there.
Yeah.
Just my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't even remember, how did the barrel factory get that approval? Don, do you remember?
Yeah, I mean, it was considered a continuation of a woodworking business because.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Flooring in there. And so it was just a continuation of basic woodworking skills.
That company is now closed and they're not going to reopen.
So what is there? It's a vacant building?
Well,
I think it's for
they
sale.
still got all their stuff in there, and I don't know if it's for sale yet, but
I think it says available.
does it now?
I think it does.
No, I think that's the land next to it.
Oh,
Weren't they thinking about moving to what we're proposing to be our industrial area? If they could have had a larger
whatever. I don't know.
structure.
Anyway. So if
Yeah.
They were looking to
so
get
so
more.
It's
so
more
I would just as
complicated.
soon leave that out and leave
Yeah.
that alone.
We got it.
There's an agreement on that.
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay. Well, then I think we're all set then. We can start on the EAF. We'll work to this hearing. And it would be all the text changes for this hearing. And
That's
that
great.
hearing would be the map changes.
Great.
Substantial work. Awesome.
Brilliant work,
Okay.
everybody.
Really great.
ZRC.
That's
yay.
great.
Great, okay. All right.
Nice
Thank
job,
you,
guys.
everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay, yep.
Sleep well.
It worked. The meeting worked.
I know,
great.
look at
It worked great. This was
Are
really
you- We're leaving, we'll leave. You have your meeting continuing? Okay.
Okay, we'll leave. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
They're awesome. They're really.
I know, they were
They're really
great.
great. Let me tell you,
A great hire.
that's a good outfit. For
Yeah.
it.
I think, are we done?
I think so.
Then, could I have a motion to close the meeting?
I move that we close this meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.